Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's January 3rd, 2016. Happy New Year to everyone. Yeah, absolutely. My name is John DeLynn, and I'm a member of the steering committee for the Cache Valley Community of Good. We want to welcome you all. Thank you all for joining us, both those who have been with us before and those who are joining us for the first time. We're so glad you're here. One of the things we like to do whenever we start one of these meetings is read sort of the group purpose, just so that we can all kind of remind ourselves why we're here and what we're doing. So we have a Facebook page on Facebook. For those of you who aren't members, please join it. It's called Community of Good-Cache Valley. And this is a little group purpose that we put together. It says, this secular community provides a supportive environment to residents in or near Cache Valley who may or may not choose to affiliate with organized religion. Dedicated to social interaction, intellectual exploration, and humanitarian service, the Community of Good allows members to enjoy the benefits of a tight-knit community without the dogma, rites, or rules of religion. So that's our group purpose. We want to sort of also add a little reminder that we want to make the Community of Good meetings positive for everyone. So please be sure to keep your comments, questions, posts, and etc. respectful. One of the things we've been talking about and that we all feel pretty strongly about is that there are people here who are members of various religious traditions, who are people of faith. There are also people here who don't particularly attend any religious group or necessarily even have beliefs. And we want this group to feel safe and comfortable for everyone. So we definitely try never to make criticisms or negative comments about other religious traditions or beliefs. We just keep it positive and constructive and focused on those good sorts of things. So there'll be some, maybe some interactive speaker audience discussion today, maybe some Q&A. And in that, we just ask you to please keep your comments respectful in ways that would be comfortable to everyone. We have several announcements today. So the first, again, is to join the Facebook group if you're not a member. We traditionally have held a support group for people who just need support. Sometimes that support group is for people who are transitioning from one religious tradition, either out of a religious tradition or to something else. But it's generally for, any sort of support that someone might need. Now, traditionally, that support group has been held on Thursday nights at the library. Do we know if that's scheduled for this week? Okay, we haven't started yet for the new year. Some of you may know that I also recently graduated with my degree in psychology. I'm willing to do sort of a lunch support group maybe on Fridays here in Cache Valley. So either one of those things are possibilities. If any of you are interested, please come up afterwards. We'll take down your name and we can get a support group going that meets your needs if you need support. We pay around, I think it's $120 about a week to rent this facility. And the only way we're able to do that is with your support. We voted in a financial person or two to help take care of those funds. Your donations are welcome in that little box. That's a little pink box at the back. If any of you have just some little bit of spare change you can throw towards renting this facility, that's the only way we can pay for it. There's also a PayPal little account that's been set up on our Facebook page that you can connect to as well. So please help us pay for this facility. Sometimes the money can also go towards the food that we're going to have afterwards. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, we want to bring up Amelia Gutke for a second. She is going to talk about the childcare. Amelia has been kind enough to sort of volunteer to be in charge of childcare. Actually, it's a rotation. She wants other people to step up as well. So Amelia, come on up and talk for that for just a second. Let's give her a round of applause.
Okay, just really quickly, this is our second time having the children's room over here, and so far so good. Last time it was awesome, and it's going great today. We're getting better and better at it as we go along. I just really need some volunteers to talk to me or message me so we can get into a rotation. I think that if we get into some sort of rotation of adults or parents in that room, you'd only have to be in there once every 2 or 3 months, and I think it would be totally awesome, and then I could come in here sometimes. But I love your kids. Or another option, something they do at the Presbyterian Church, is they hire a couple of college girls and make sure they're very well trained, and they just pay them to watch the kids every week. So that's another option. I just want everybody to be thinking about that and enjoy the meeting today. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
Now we'd like to turn the time over to Zach. Zach, are you here? Zach has a little announcement about music. Come on up, Zach.
Hello, I'm Zachary Webb. Me and Ariel are mainly in charge of the music in these meetings, and I just want you all to know that this is a very vocal and open community. If you want to express yourself musically or in some way of art, some way to express yourself in this meeting, to give a good thought to other people, to spread the cheer, in other words, then please come to me or Ariel, and we can fit it into the meeting. That's all.
Thanks, Zach. Also, thanks for helping out with the music for today. Couple exciting meetings coming up. So on January 17th, we're going to be having Mike Aus and Helen Stringer from Oasis, the Oasis Network, just to really briefly explain what that's about. About 2012, Mike Aus he was a pastor, I think, of a Protestant religious group in Houston. He sort of lost his faith, transitioned out of being a pastor of that church, and started a secular Sunday service in Houston. He called it Oasis, and that's been going successfully for about 3 years now. So he started the Oasis Network, which was a group of people trying to do exactly what we're doing across the country. In 2013, Helen Stringer of Kansas City started her own congregation. And the Houston and the Kansas City Oasis congregations, they call them groups. They have about 150, 200 people coming every week. They have youth groups. They have a really exciting model for how they hold these types of meetings. And so we've invited them to come speak to us. They're actually paying their own airfare to come. So on January 17th, the Sunday, 2 Sundays from now, they'll be coming here and speaking to us about their lessons learned from running secular communities like this. And then afterwards, we'll have a little bit of a training meeting, because we'll decide as a group whether we want to affiliate with Oasis or not, or if we just want to, take some of their ideas or loosely affiliate, whatever it is. We're just really excited that they're coming. So please join us in 2 weeks for Mike and Helen. And then on January 23rd, we will be having a game show with a comedian. So Ellen Dobbins of Salt Lake City will be here. It'll be in this room. She'll be doing a comedy routine, and then afterwards she's going to host an interactive game show that should be really fun. It's family friendly, and we hope you'll all join us. It's something that's a little bit different for Sundays, but we don't want every Sunday to always feel the same. We want to experiment with more social things or other types of things as well. What's the date? 23rd. Oh, it's a Saturday. Yeah, so it's a Saturday. So it is a Saturday. It's not a Sunday. Please forgive me. January 23rd, Saturday, here. What time? 7 p.m.? 7 p.m., not 7 a.m. That would be bad. Okay. We're trying to put together a more formalized steering committee for this group. And so if any of you are interested in participating on the steering committee and sort of deciding how we move forward, we would love to have you. Please let us know afterwards. And then just remember that today, maybe the most important part of today, after our meeting here, we're going to have refreshments and visiting in the group, kind of a cafeteria meeting hall kind of place in the room right next door. So please, there'll be drinks, food, and coffee. So if any of you are interested, please stay and visit for as long as you want. We've got the room for at least a couple hours afterwards. Quickly, I want to acknowledge Zachary Webb for his help with music today, Ariel Hobner for her help with the program committee, Candace Sorensen for marketing. She put together the flyer. DePrize and Daniel Jolly have helped with food. And we have many people on our steering committee, including Tanner Gilliland, Kimberly Nelson, Jolene Woodmark, Connor Snyder. There are others as well, but let's just give them all a hand for organizing today. All right. So again, thanks for coming. That's a lot of announcements, but lots of good things going on. We're going to begin today with a special musical number. My daughter Maya and my son Winston have put together a song that they're going to sing with us. It's called Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. They're going to, I think, sing together the first verse. And then for those who are interested in singing along, we'll sing along together the second and the third verse. And if we get the AV right, the words will appear on the screen behind me.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise his name, I'm fixed upon it, name of God's redeeming love. Hither to thy love has blessed me, thou hast brought me to thy place, and I know by that will bring me safely home by thy good grace. You sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger brought me with his precious blood. Oh, to grace how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter blind our wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Thanks, Maya and Winston. That was really beautiful. Beautiful choice. I have to say that it's weird for me now to sing a hymn that's sort of religious. In some ways, it feels really special because I come from that heritage. On the other hand, it feels a little weird to sing those words. Anyone felt weird singing those words? Yeah. So that's one of the things that we hope is to invite you guys to give feedback. We're kind of learning as we go, and to the extent to which we're okay with sort of a diversity of different sorts of things, that's fine. If we want to steer away from that sort of thing, we'd love your feedback on that too. But thanks for being a good sport. I think that was beautiful, and Maya and Winston, thank you so much again. Okay, just got a last second announcement from Tanner. Isn't modern technology wonderful? Tanner is saying that the steering committee meeting Wednesday night at 7 in the old Ephraim room in the Logan Library. So if anyone wants to come and be a part of helping to shape the future of this group, please join us. That's going to be my late night, sweetie, 7 o'clock on Wednesday. Okay, so now yes. Yep, we will post it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now for the main event. Today we're very excited to hear a good friend of mine speak to us. His name is Noah Rasheta. I've known Noah for several years, and he's an inspiration to me in many, many ways. He is the CEO, founder of Ice Stabilizer and Pro Gear X and Photo Pro, so several sort of small businesses, small to medium businesses. He's an entrepreneur. But he's also the founder of a website called secularbuddhism.com. And that's interesting because Noah, he's told me he's read about 40 plus books on Zen Buddhism. He's really taken, even though he's been through his own sort of faith transition, he'll talk more about this, but I think he considers himself secular. He still finds mindfulness and spirituality, however you might define that, to be a very important part of his life. So he tells me he's read 40 or 50 books on Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and he's put together this website called Secular Buddhism, which is sort of trying to encourage spirituality of sorts, even after you may not believe in anything religiously. And so we're very excited to have Noah come. Noah loves working with others to make the world a better place, studying, embodying, and teaching the fundamentals of secular Buddhism, integrating Buddhist philosophy, modern science, humanism, and fun. Today we'll be speaking to us about spirituality after a faith transition. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Noah Rasheta.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. I was just telling my friend Nancy up there, normally I don't get nervous to talk or anything, but for some reason today, it's like, I'm a little nervous. But I'm excited to be here. Buddhism is a topic I'm really passionate about. So any chance that I get to talk about it is always fun for me. But just a little background on me. So I started studying Buddhism about 5 years ago, and then started teaching it about a year ago. And I'm in a lay ministry program now, and in 2017 I should graduate being an official teacher, Buddhist teacher. So it's been a fun journey. But as far as the faith transition part of the story goes, you know, It's funny because when I was looking at the topic for today, spirituality after a faith transition, I couldn't help but thinking, oh, that sounds like learning to love again after having a broken heart, or something along those lines. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, that actually is a lot of what it's like. And for me personally, I went through both of those things at the same time. It was a crisis, a marriage crisis, coupled with a faith crisis that I was going through back in 2010 that started me on this whole path. So the more I thought about the parallel, the more I realized what we end up doing is very similar. You know, when you've been hurt by someone in a relationship, whether you leave the relationship or stay in the relationship, you start putting up these walls and defenses. And you want to make sure you're never going to experience that hurt or pain again. So you kind of close up and you don't fully, authentically love. And it takes time to warm up to that idea, and then the defenses come down, and before you know it, you're feeling in love again, with whether it's in a new relationship or the same relationship. But I found for me, the spiritual path ended up being similar. And at first, there was a lot of hesitation to anything, even the word spirituality was kind of a trigger. And then over time, it's become something that I've embraced again, but completely redefined. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So some of these definitions. So when I talk about spirituality, or when I'm teaching Buddhism, before I jump into that, 2 quotes I want to share with you that I always bring up at the start of any conversation with Buddhism. The first one is from the Dalai Lama, and he says, don't take what you learn from Buddhism to become a Buddhist. Use it to become a better whatever you already are. And that is where I always start when I'm talking about the topic of Buddhism, because there's nothing to change to convert away from. The goal of it is to have a better understanding of what it means to be human. It's all about the human condition and lessening suffering. And the other is a quote from one of my favorite books of all time from Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. And in this book he says, it's one thing to think that you're on the right path, and it's another to think that yours is the only path. So keeping those two things in mind, that's how I want to start talking about the topic of spirituality. So I like to imagine everyone is spiritual. So there are two needs that are fulfilled with spirituality. And the first one is, the way I view spirituality or teach it is the way that you relate to anything greater than yourself is one component of spirituality. And the second is how we find meaning in life. So both of these things, when they're fulfilled, that is the sense of spirituality that I'm talking about. So what you'll see when you approach spirituality from this perspective, everyone is spiritual. It's spirituality that drives us to be religious. It's also a sense of spirituality that could drive us to be non-religious or atheistic or secular. Because we're trying to identify how we relate to something greater than ourselves, and we're trying to find meaning in life, even if that meaning is that there is no meaning. So that's how I approach spirituality. And in my, I attended a lecture series about 5 years ago on world religions, and it talked about the 5 major world religions. And the last one was Buddhism. And this was an all-day thing. I've always enjoyed history and philosophy and religion. But by the time I got to that 5th topic and they started talking about Buddhist philosophical concepts, it was like someone turned the light on in the room for me. And I thought, oh, this really resonates with me. Why have I never heard of some of these concepts? So I really embraced it and started studying with different Buddhist traditions, the Tibetan tradition, and then I moved on to the Zen tradition and the Pure Land Jodo Shin tradition. And I've tried different ones, realizing, oh, they're all pretty different. And ultimately found what worked for me was to have a very secular understanding of it. And that's kind of where all of this comes from. So the concept of spirituality being the basis of determining whether we're religious or even non-religious is taught by the Dalai Lama in his book, Beyond Religion. And the way he explains it, I really enjoy. He talks about how water is what keeps us alive. But we don't all just drink water. Some people enjoy tea, some people enjoy Dr. Pepper, whatever your drink of choice is. The flavor can add a lot to the enjoyment of it, but what keeps you alive drinking that is the fact that it has water. And when we're talking about spirituality, you could view religions the same way. And the Dalai Lama talks about this concept that our religion or even our non-religion ends up being a flavor that's added to the water being your underlying sense of spirituality that you get from how you relate to anything greater than yourself and how you find meaning in life. And I really like that explanation because it allows me to have the freedom to appreciate other people's sense of spirituality as their specific flavor that works for them. And that's great. So notice on this definition of spirituality, we're talking about how to find meaning in life, but that's not the same thing as finding the meaning of life. And Buddhism is really good about explaining and distinguishing the difference between the two. And Alan Watts, a Buddhist philosopher, talks about this concept with the analogy of peeling away at an onion. He says you could spend your whole life peeling away the onion, trying to find the pit in the middle. And as you discard layer after layer after layer, you finally get to the center and realize there is no pit. There were just layers upon layers. And what you end up with is everything that was good about the onion you've discarded, looking for something that's not there. And he compares this to spending your life searching for the meaning of life. It's like peeling away at the onion, looking for the pit. And the difference with finding meaning in life is we all find meaning in life. And this evolves and changes over time. For me in college, the meaning that I found in life was very different than the meaning I find in life now as a dad with 3 little kids and a newborn at home. And I'm sure the meaning that I find in life once my kids are all grown up and out of the house is different than the meaning of life that I find at this phase. And this ties in really well with the Buddhist concept of continual change, of impermanence. Everything is constantly changing. So what might be meaningful at this stage of your life is probably different than what was meaningful 5 years from now, and therefore 5 years from now will probably be different. There is a parable that the Buddha taught that I really like, that is the parable of the arrow. And the way the story goes, there's a man who's out in the forest, and he has his group or his entourage with him. They're out hunting, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, he's struck with an arrow. And he's looking at himself. He's been struck with an arrow. He collapses. He's there bleeding. And he immediately dispatches his men to go find out who shot the arrow, what was his name, what clan is he from, what was the complexion of his skin. And he's asking all these questions all the way down to minute details. What kind of feathers were used on the arrow? And his men disperse in all the directions to try to find these things out. And the Buddha compares this man to somebody who is so distracted with finding the answers to metaphysical questions that he's completely overlooked the fact that he's been shot by an arrow and he's laying on the ground bleeding. The Buddhist concept of this specific parable, what it's trying to get at is suffering is the part of the human condition of life. And how do we find a way to minimize suffering is like trying to remove the arrow. You could send everyone off in all the directions to find the answers to the questions that have nothing to do with easing the pain of the arrow that you've been struck with, and you know, everything should be focused on one thing only. You've been struck with an arrow. And I find this to be a very pragmatic approach to the experience of life. So to understand the concept of suffering from the Buddhist perspective, I want to tell another little story. So in Buddhism, there's this idea that there are three major types of suffering. And if we want to alleviate suffering, we need to understand what suffering is. And the very first discourse that the Buddha gave was on the topic of suffering. But he talks about there being three different kinds of suffering. And the way to understand them makes more sense through a story. So I want you to imagine that you've been saving up all of your money. You don't have a car now, but you've decided that if you had the money, you would buy whatever your favorite car is. So now that you've saved up that money, you go and you buy your favorite car. And you get in it, and I don't know what kind of car it is. It's probably different for everyone. But let's imagine you're going to go show it to your friends. So you take off, you're going down the road, and you're really excited in your new car. You didn't notice the light was red, and you hit the car that was stopped at the light. And the airbag goes off, and you're in pain, and you're okay. You get out of the car. Maybe your nose is bleeding. Well, the first kind of pain is the pain of suffering, and that's the physical pain you're feeling. Maybe you just broke your nose, or the seatbelt cut your neck a little bit, but the pain that you're experiencing in that moment would be this first type of suffering. The second type is when you take a step back and you look at your car totaled, and you're now experiencing the pain of loss, the suffering of loss. And these first two types of suffering are inevitable. I mean, if you get hurt, you're going to feel pain, and if you lose something, you're going to feel suffering and pain as well. But it's this third type of suffering that Buddhism really focuses on, which is called pervasive suffering. And it's that lingering feeling that something is wrong. In this story, in this example, it could be that idea that, well, now my friends are going to think I'm an idiot because I just crashed my brand new car. And now you're experiencing real suffering, real pain at how you think others are going to perceive you. And that's the kind of pain and suffering that Buddhism is saying you can get rid of that based on perspective. It could also be the pain or suffering that you were experiencing prior to having the car, thinking, if I could just get a Ferrari, then maybe my father-in-law will think I'm cool, or any kind of variation on that story. So those are the three kinds of suffering, and the reason that third one is so dangerous is because it leads us to a way of living that's very reactive, instinctive reactivity. And in Buddhism, it's dangerous because they call this the three poisons. There are three poisons associated to this third type of pain, which would be anger, greed, ignorance, and confusion. So the idea with anger is Well, I'll kind of explain all of them at once, but the idea here is you have everyday life, and then you have two categories. There's the things that I think that if I can get, then I'm not gonna experience pain or suffering anymore. So these are the things that you want. This is under the category of greed. So this would be fame, power, money, anything that you think if I can finally get that, then life is going to be good. On the flip side of that are the things that you think if you can just avoid, then things are going to be good. This would be things like, if I could just avoid getting cancer, or if I could just avoid losing my job, or if I could avoid anything that you don't want would fall into this second category. And then the third one, confusion, is the confusion that thinking that the first two have anything to do with happiness in the first place. So the way the teaching goes is that's how we live our lives. And we're always trying to seek the things that we think if we can finally get them, life's finally going to be good. And if we can just avoid the things that we don't want, then life is finally going to be good. And we know that that's not true. Studies have shown people who win the lottery within the space of about a year go back to their base level of happiness. People who encounter physical trauma, maybe lose a limb or something, they experience pain or suffering, but within a year they're back to their baseline of happiness. And you can look at this just from a common sense standpoint, and you would know, well, that you can't ever arrive at something that guarantees happiness, because do we know that there are wealthy people who suffer? We do. What about rich people, or what about famous people? We hear about them all the time, and we're all the same. There is no magic number or formula that if you can just solve this riddle or this formula and get this thing at the end, then you're good. That's it. Life is good. You made it. This is like peeling back the layers of the onion looking for a pit. It's just not there. Understanding suffering, one more aspect of this that's also through a story. We tend to take everything really personal, right? But the understanding of suffering being universal is really powerful because it helps us to not take things personally. And there's the way I like to teach this specific idea or concept is, imagine that you're at the start of a path that goes through the forest, and you're going to go on a hike. It's the start of a journey. And right before you go, I warn you and say, hey, just so you know, one of my friends is on the path. He's dressed in a bear costume, and he's trying to scare people. At some point, he's probably going to jump out and scare you and try to scare you. Okay, well, and there you go. You start on your journey. Now you know this. And guess what happens? At some point on this path, there comes my friend jumping out of behind the bushes to scare you. Is it going to startle you? Yeah, absolutely. But for a split second, you're going to be able to remember, oh, I knew this was going to happen. Okay, I can get through this. And then you keep on going. And what the concept of understanding the nature of suffering is that in life there is suffering. That's exactly how it works. There's nothing personal about it. The things that jump out and scare us are scary. They are things like losing a loved one, finding out that you have cancer, losing your job, being in an accident. Whatever it is, the moment of suffering, when it arises, the first thing we do is, why me? Why me? This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I've been doing this, and that. We live in that delusion of the three poisons, thinking, well, wait a second, this wasn't supposed to happen to me. I've been, doing the things that I need to do to make sure life is good, and avoiding the things that I need to avoid to make sure life is good. But then that bear still jumps out to scare you. And understanding that's the nature of life helps minimize the suffering that we experience at that moment, because now we know it's not personal. There's not some cosmic form of justice system saying, you needed to be scared right now, so boom, there you go. You can take a step back and say, wow, this is a part of life. This is what happens. And this is what's happening to me. And you can look around and realize, wow, someone else got scared. It's a lot scarier than what jumped out at me. And we don't have to take it so personally. So the goal of mindfulness or Buddhist practice is to start living a life where we don't suffer from that instinctive reactivity, where we're constantly trying to check off the things that we need to do and avoid the things that we need to avoid, so that we can be happy. Spirituality in this sense ends up being more of a quest. So going back to that example, you're starting on the path that goes through the forest. Well, that's the quest, and it's the quest for a radical shift in perspective rather than a journey that leads you to a place where you arrive at a set of answers to whatever existential questions you had. We're more like the guy who's been shot with the arrow, and here we are. You're shot with the arrow. From the moment you're born, you know that you die. And there's no other pressing thing than how do I minimize the suffering of the journey that I'm on? And to spend too much time going off looking for the answers to the questions that will do nothing about the fact that the arrow is still there would be a waste of time, according to the Buddhist definition of all this stuff. So, kind of in a nutshell, that's the understanding of suffering within the Buddhist lens. Now, it goes from here to so many other things, understanding concepts like oneness, interdependence, impermanence. These are all topics that start to make sense within this framework of understanding that the nature of living is that there is suffering. In life, there is suffering. Now, a common misconception people have when they start studying Buddhism, they're like, well, what a pessimistic religion, or what a pessimistic way of viewing the world. The world is suffering. But it's not pessimistic, it's very pragmatic. It's saying, yeah, and that's okay. That's a part of living. And you can go on pretending like it's not, but as soon as that bear on the path jumps out, then you're going to start saying, whoa, what happened? Why is this happening to me? And then you'll realize, oh, it's not personal. This is the nature of being alive. So a couple other things I wanted to mention. We have the tendency to treat people and view people as finished products. You know, when you're talking to a kid and you say, what are you going to be when you grow up? It's like, oh, they grew up and they did it? That's it? They did it? No. I'm still growing up, and I'm sure every other adult in here is still growing up. I've had 4 or 5 career paths, and the one I'm on now is the one I'm on now, but that's probably not the one I'll be on forever. But why do we tend to view others as finished products instead of works in progress? What Buddhism is trying to teach is that there is no finished product. You know, the idea here is it'll take a lifetime of living to learn how to live. Because as long as you're alive, you're still learning to live, right? And then maybe we're not going to explore what happens after that, because we've been struck with the arrow, right? So viewing it like this, spirituality ends up kind of being a sense of freedom. It's the freedom to allow things to just be what they are. So something that Buddhism really tries to teach and promote is this idea that what is what is. And this is relevant to the present. And then there's the story of what we think what is what is. And we live in this world of the story, right? What is whatever I think it is. I'm caught up in the story, but that's different from actually what is what is. So the way that this is taught in Buddhism, it's like you're living life with tinted glasses, maybe a green tint. Imagine if you've ever worn glasses with a heavy tint. After a while, you kind of get used to it, and you don't realize that there are other colors and shades that you can't see because you're wearing a really strong tint, green tint. And it's when you can remove those that you can start to see what's really there. And the tint that we wear in our everyday lives, these are concepts, ideas, beliefs. These are the things that prevent us from seeing life as it really is. And in Buddhism, they teach this through several different ways, but one of the ways is through koans, or through riddles. And they're trying to get you to realize, as you try to solve the riddle, what's really there. And one that I want to share with you that I really like, well, I'm going to share two of them with you. One of them is the koan says, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And you can ask this, and you can think about it, and people will, I don't know. You try it, and people are trying to explain the answer. The answer to the sound of one hand clapping must be, whatever it is. Think about it for a second. How would you answer that? And students will spend time, months and months, trying to solve this riddle, and the teacher won't tell you what it is. You have to figure it out on your own. I'm going to ruin the whole thing because I'm just going to tell you what it is. It says years of monks can be really upset at me. But the answer to the sound of one hand clapping, it's simple. It's the sound of one hand clapping. You think, well, that's stupid. But what else could it be? What else could the sound of one hand clapping be other than the sound of one hand clapping? And if you think about that, that's what we do in life, right? We're presented with any kind of whatever it is, and we're making meaning. We're trying to solve it, and we're living on the side of the story. Rather than just facing what it is what it is. So the answer to what is it is what it is. Pretty simple. And, all of this starts to make a lot more sense as you study more of the in-depth philosophical concepts behind Buddhism. And the last one I want to share with you is a gentleman is walking along the river, and he's been trying to cross to get to the other side. And he's looking up and down, and he can't find where the crossing is. So he just picks a direction, and he starts going and going. After about an hour of walking, he notices someone sitting on the other side. Of course, it happens to be a monk, because in all these stories, it's always a monk. So he yells out to him, and he's like, "Excuse me, sir, how do I get to the other side?" And the monk looks at him, kind of perplexed, and then he looks down the river and up the river, and he's like, "You are on the other side." There are a lot of fun stories like this in Buddhism, something I've really enjoyed. I guess I will tell you one more. This it's actually a parable, it's not a riddle. But it's to teach the concept of letting go, and it's the parable of the raft. And the way the story goes is you spend your life on a journey, and you arrive at a river, and you need to get to the other side. So you spend all the amount of time that you need to collect wood to build a raft. And to get to the other side, your life literally depends on this raft. You need to make sure that the ropes are strong, that the wood floats, and however much time you're going to invest into this raft, you're going to do it as if your life depended on it, because it does. And the moment you get to the other side of the river on your raft, to continue carrying the raft no longer serves its purpose. And on the spiritual journey of Buddhism, there's this constant teaching of letting go, of let it go. And it's taught with this concept because, even if the raft, your life literally depended on it at one point in time, it doesn't anymore because you're already at the other side. How foolish would it be to just carry it on your back now that you're walking through the desert? So I wanted to end the talk with that concept. As you journey on your own spiritual journey, we're building rafts along the way. Whether it be rafts or any other kind of spiritual tools that at one time were relevant may not be relevant anymore, and it's okay to let go of those things. It's okay to understand that it was the raft and my life depended on it, but I left it there and now I'm here and I don't need a raft and here I go. And I like to view my own personal journey that way. Concepts and ideas and beliefs that were vital and critical for me at one point on my journey may not be that anymore, and it's okay to let go of those things and continue the journey without those things because they're no longer necessary. And when I encounter another river or a lake or whatever it is, you start building whatever you need for that part of the journey. But this gives you the freedom to just be on the journey, to do whatever you need to do and not get caught up with the concepts and ideas that can hinder the path that you're on. So, in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. There's a whole lot more to it that can't be explained in a 1-hour presentation. But I wanted to see if you guys have any questions that I can answer at this point, whether it be about Buddhism or anything really. The Alchemist. Good question. Why is The Alchemist my favorite book? I read it a long time ago in high school, and I liked it back then just because it was an entertaining story, but it became more relevant to me now because I feel like on my own spiritual journey, it resembled the story that happens in the book, which is that he starts at one place, goes on this fantastic journey, and arrives right back at where he started. I felt like when I started my faith transition, I thought, whoa, this might not be what I thought it was. And the first thing I started to do is I'm going to go find what it is. And the longer I spent studying Buddhism, the more it kind of threw it back at me saying, well, what you're looking for, you're not going to find. And ultimately, that led me right back to where I was. And all of a sudden, I felt like the need that I had to find what is the meaning of life, I gave it up and thought, oh, I don't have to find it because it's whatever I'm making it to be all along the way. So The Alchemist kind of reminds me of that. It's a journey that I love. That it takes you everywhere, but it goes back to where it started. And for me, it took me from the moment I started my faith crisis, thinking I'm going to go find this somewhere, and it brought me back to where I am is just where I am, and now I'm completely content with where I am. That's why I like it. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, good question. What do I mean by secular Buddhism? Well, when I first started studying Buddhism, I just viewed Buddhism as Buddhism. What I didn't realize is there are several schools of Buddhism. Some have a very heavy component of devotion, like a devotional aspect to it, with chanting and rituals. And then that's on one spectrum. That would be Tibetan Buddhism. On the opposite spectrum, you'd have like Zen Buddhism, which is a very minimalistic approach, and it doesn't have a lot of the kind of the dogma or the cosmology of Tibetan Buddhism. In Tibetan Buddhism, you can find, there are worlds and realms and demons and all kinds of things where you're like, coming from my background, it was like, well, what is all this? That's kind of weird. And at the same time, you'd hear these concepts that just made so much sense. It's like, I really like this, but I don't know if I like it. And then as I would explore other ones, I'd realize, okay, they don't talk about any of the weird stuff. They just talk about the stuff I like. And that kept happening with different schools. So when I talk about secular Buddhism, I've tried to extract the pure philosophical concepts that are universal among all the schools of Buddhism and just present those as a philosophical way of living without the devotional aspect. I would say there is a devotional aspect, but it's to life itself. It's realizing I'm devoted to living. I have a reason to want to live. So there is a devotional aspect to that, and it's just to life itself. And there's a faith aspect too. It's faith in the unknown. It's having the faith that life's just going to be life, and whatever it throws at me, I'll figure it out. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. She was asking if there is a book that's something that would be a good starting point to not have to learn all of that. Yeah, when I was telling John earlier, all the different books that I read, that's what I was finding out. It took all those books to decide, okay, well, these are the things that are common across all the traditions. There is an author, his name is Stephen Batchelor, and he has a book called Buddhism Without Beliefs and Confessions of a Buddhist Atheist. And these are the stories of him transitioning from being a Tibetan Buddhist monk to becoming a secular Buddhist teacher that he is today. Those were very influential for me in understanding that there is a form of Buddhism that can be extracted from any of the cosmology or any of the dogma in some of the schools of Buddhism. So I would say any book by Stephen Batchelor is a good starting point. And I read another book called Rebel Buddha that I really enjoyed, and that was, I wouldn't say, at the time I didn't know that there was such a thing as a secular way of viewing it, but I've reread it. I've probably read that book 6 times since, and it's a very secular understanding of Buddhist philosophy.
What are the books again?
Buddhism Without Beliefs is a really good one. Confessions of a Buddhist Atheist is a really good one. The Dalai Lama has one called Beyond Religion. That one's a good one. And Rebel Buddha. Yeah. I can put a list out. I can share it with John and put all of my favorite books. You'd have a lot of reading. Yes. Okay. So there was a post where I mentioned some concrete things I've done to. Yeah. So things that I do to have spiritual connection. A big one is gratitude. When I wake up in the morning, this has become a practice I do with my wife as well. And my wife is LDS and practicing. So we try to incorporate some of our ideas together, and instead of praying together, we spend time talking about what we're grateful for. For me, it was important to still have a pulse or a sense of hopes and dreams and wishes of the family, and you can get a lot of that through listening to everyone in the family pray. So we still practice that, but to really get that in our relationship between the two of us, we decided to start a practice in the morning where we just share what things we're grateful for, and it's usually something to the effect of, what are 2 things you're grateful for today, or what is something that could happen today that would make today great? Just simple questions that can give each other an insight into our hopes and aspirations for the day. That's one. Another one that I practice is meditation. I practice meditation usually in the mornings, or sometimes I need it after work when I get home. And it's nice to kind of have that as a buffer between the stress of work life and then coming home to family life. But for me, it's not a way of isolating myself from them. I don't go hide in the corner or something. I'll sit down in the living room with the kids watching their show, and I'll just take a moment and breathe. Like, nobody knows I'm meditating. I'm just focusing on my breath, trying to take it all in, that I'm home. Here I am, and there's nowhere else to be. There's nothing else to do. This is where I am. This is my present moment. So those are a couple of examples of things that I do that help me feel spiritually connected to the present moment. Yeah. Yes. Did it take me a long time to learn how to do meditation, was the question. It did. So when I first started looking into meditation, there's just so many kinds of meditation, and I bought this a CD that you're supposed to listen to for an hour, and the first day I was so gung-ho and listened to an hour, and then like 4 months later I was like, I need to do that again. And the more I started learning about meditation, the more I realized that it doesn't really have much to do with the amount of time. It has to do with the consistency. So I learned early on 2 minutes a day is significantly better than 1 hour every 4 months. I decided to just make it a practice. It's what I do when I wake up, take 10 deep breaths. So the whole purpose of meditation, from the Buddhist explanation of things, is to train yourself to be present. Because what we're really good at is not being present, right? We've all driven somewhere, and you get there and you think, how did I get here? But we live life the same way. And we reach milestones in life and look back and think, how did I get here? So meditation's trying to help. It's a form of exercise to be present. So all it takes to meditate is a couple minutes of being really present to wherever you are and whatever you're doing. So what I like to do, even if it's just a minute long, I'll be breathing. It's super simple. You're just breathing. That's it. And I try to focus on different senses. What can I smell right now? And you'd be surprised the things that you sense that you didn't know were there. So I'll go through the different senses. What do I see? What do I smell? What do I hear? And I've discovered all kinds of cool little things, like sounds that my house makes that I never thought of before, because you don't just sit there listening, So it's really that simple. Just trying to focus on being really present and catching something you maybe never caught. Anyone else? Yes? Sure. Can I talk a little bit about karma? So karma is a really important component in Buddhism, and I think it's a really misunderstood component of Buddhism as well. The traditional misconception about karma is this cosmic justice that, what goes around comes around. But simple observation will tell you that can't possibly be. You have people who are jerks, who are living very successful lives, and people who are very kind and good, and bad things keep happening to them. So the secular Buddhist understanding, and I would say the actual authentic understanding of karma in Buddhism is very simple. It's just cause and effect. And the understanding of the law of cause and effect just means if I let go, this falls. And then you don't read into it any further. So you could say, if I was really nice to you and that put you in a good mood and you donated money at the gas station, there was karma that led to that, but it doesn't mean that money goes on and eventually makes it back to me. There's no loop in the system. Even though it could happen, that's not how it's not because it's supposed to happen. So it's really simple. It's just there is cause and there is effect. Now, where the sense of ethics come in with the law of karma in Buddhism is there's a tremendous sense of responsibility, because when I realize that everything that I say and do has an effect, then I have to be very cautious with what I say and what I do. Not because there's any form of reward or punishment out of it, only because there's a sense of wanting to lessen the suffering of the world. It's like there's a compassion element to it, but it's just cause and effect. There's not much more to it. Thank you. Yes? How do I translate and communicate these ideas to my children? That's a good question. My kids are still really young. I have a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 3-month-old. With my 6-year-old, my brother bought me a book called Buddha at Bedtime, and it's kind of like Aesop's Fables, but it takes some of these Buddhist stories I was telling you about earlier, and it puts them in a format for kids. And we read those at night, and at the end of every one of those stories, it tells you the lesson of the story is da-da-da-da. So that's what we've been doing now. That's what I've been sharing with them now. At some point when they're older, that's something I'm looking forward to. How am I going to teach some of these concepts to them? I don't know yet. But little things like the storybooks, that's what I'm doing now. Any other questions? Yes?
How would you suggest going about keeping family discussions with the different denominational histories productive and not contentious?
How to have family discussions with various denominations not be contentious? That's a good question. In our case, I think the reason it's worked out well is because I think that my wife can sense there's genuinely no part of me that's trying to pull her from what's meaningful to her. So it's hard to get contentious unless it seems like there's an agenda, right? And I had to make that clear on my part as well. It's like I don't want to be your project to get me to think the way you think, and the same respect will be given on my part that you're not a hidden project of me to try to convince you to think like I think. And it's worked out so far. I think it's something that you figure out as you go, but so far it's worked out. And when we address specific topics, for example, my son is way into dinosaurs, and out of the blue he started asking us questions about where did dinosaurs come from, why are they gone? And as we got into this topic, I thought it was really cool how my wife would present, well, I think da-da-da-da, and then she'd say, Daddy, what do you think? And then I could explain, well, I think, and then we'd say, well, what do you think? And we'd let him kind of choose. And I think we've both been very good about allowing each other to voice each other's opinions on topics as they come up. I'm sure it'll get more complicated as the conversations deepen, as the kids get older, but I kind of view that as, with all of this, we figure that out when we get there. How do I think about creativity in the medium, short-term, and long-term goals with my family? I'm not sure what you mean.
So like, for example, January, you're looking at the new year, thinking about what you want to have accomplished, or, goals that you might have, even in like a spiritual context or a personal development context. Does your spiritual practice with Buddhism give
Oh, okay.
Ideas,
Yeah.
the way to approach that, and part of what inspired the question was the question about the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes your goals and your wife's goals might differ, and so.
More than sometimes. Yeah.
Also, you talk about a focus on the now. So can you
Yeah.
set goals if you're focused on the now?
Yeah.
What
That.
that means, is that attachment, does that promote suffering if you're planning for the future?
Right.
And then tied to outcomes that may cause suffering.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good question. So, this new year, something that kind of stood out to me is with the concept of resolutions. I've always been very creative around New Year's with everything I'm going to accomplish in the new year, right? And I found it interesting while meditating, I had this thought come to me, and I was thinking, with the in-breath, as soon as I start the out-breath, that moment of the in-breath it's already over. And I thought, it's easy with big things, like a year ends and a new year starts, but the reality is from moment to moment is the new moment. And so I tried to kind of explain this concept with family, that the resolutions we get to have is at every moment you have the opportunity to start all fresh and new again. So I don't know if I'm getting at what you're asking, but okay.
How do you apply a directionality to that, or do you have a directionality to that? Like, is there an objective that you're serving, or does your ability to be present conflict with the ability to be clear about some objective you want to accomplish?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So in family life, I don't know that we've really addressed that a whole lot. Maybe because the kids are so young, and my wife and I typically don't spend time. We both are very busy. She owns her own business as well. So I don't think we spend a lot of time in that direction. But I have noticed on the business side of things, and this might clarify a little bit more for you. On the business side of things, I've noticed how Buddhism has really helped me with how I steer my companies. Because there was this concept of, well, it's just in the present, and whatever happens, happens. Yeah, that's true, but, living a reactive life and just taking things as they come doesn't work very well with business. I noticed I would spend days just being reactive, answering emails that come in, when for the business to work well, there have to be goals. We have to understand where the company is headed, why it's headed there. But at the same time, those bears that jump out, they jump out in business too. And just last year, I had a really big contract with AT&T Wireless that was pulled. And I ended up with a lot of product that had to come back. And it was funny, as I was going through this whole process, thinking, this is exactly what I was told could happen. It's the risk of being in business, right? And so on the business side of things, I do think that there's more, I've had more moments where I'm allowing Buddhist philosophical concepts to influence how the business works. And I think the same will happen with family as my kids get older and we have goals and strategies for school or for spiritual life or relationships. I think these things will be more relevant at that time. Thanks. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you guys very much. If you have any other questions or if you want to learn more about Buddhism in general or secular Buddhism, if you go to secularbuddhism.com, that's my website/blog, I do have a section on there where you can sign up and you'll get 7 days of content that serve as an introduction to all of the major topics, whether that be impermanence, interdependence. There are several Buddhist philosophical concepts, and I explore all of those in this course that's free. It's online on secularbuddhism.com. And then, of course, you can email me or anything through that website as well, and I'd be happy to explore this topic more with you guys. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Noah, for sharing with us some of your wisdom. I know I really enjoyed that presentation, got a lot out of it. Margie, just as a little side note, my wife Margie, early last year sort of asked me if I would consider a morning practice with her. And it was simply that we meditate every 10 minutes every morning. So we downloaded this app called calm.com, CALM.com. It's on the Apple devices, it's on Android devices. It allows you 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute, 20 minute meditations. It's free. And we just started doing that every morning. We just wake up, we sit at the foot of our bed for 10 minutes. We just turn on that app and do a little mindfulness. Later, we discovered an app called Headspace, which is also really nice as well. So I just wanted to say that my wife will tell you that she's benefited a lot from that daily practice. And she says that I've been more pleasant to be around since that daily practice. So just a little tip from the DeLynn household, if that's of any use to you as well. Really briefly, we want to again thank you all for coming today and thank everyone who made today possible. Want to remind you again that in 2 weeks we'll have another Sunday service right here, again with the people from Oasis on the 23rd, which is a couple Saturdays from now. We'll be having that game show. The steering committee meeting, again, for those who didn't hear, will be 7 o'clock Wednesday night in the old Ephraim room of the Logan Library. That will be posted to the Facebook group. So please, if you want, this doesn't happen magically. There's this really dedicated group of a steering committee that's been making all this possible. I'm super grateful for all their hard work. And we just want you to know that if you value today, if you value these sorts of things, we would love help making this happen. Again, if any of you are able to throw a few dollars in the little box, that money will be used to help pay for the $120 a week that costs for this facility. I'm repeating myself, but hopefully that's useful. Again, thank you all for coming. We will be having drinks and some food and snacks. The most important part of that is just visiting. So please, even if you feel a little bit shy, please come in. Please introduce yourselves to each other. Let's get these friendships going and these relationships going, because I think that's the most important work we can do together. So I hope to see some of you in the little snack room. Again, we want to thank Amelia Gutke, who's not here, who's watching your children if you brought any. We plan to again have that service every time, and we hope that some of you will volunteer to help so that Amelia won't have to always miss this meeting. So please join our Facebook group and then volunteer with Amelia. To close, I wanted to just share a song with you today. And this is just a song that has meant a lot to me. It's a song by a man named Peter Mayer, and the song is called Holy Now. And for me, the song is all about transitioning away from a particular set of beliefs or theologies or doctrines that used to be meaningful to me but no longer worked for me. And instead, this song is about finding the beauty in everything. So that's kind of what the words Holy Now are about. It's not, again, it's coming from sort of a similar perspective that Noah shared. It's not necessarily about any particular religious or spiritual beliefs, but just finding a way in the present to see beauty in everything, in my relationship with my wife, with my children, with my friendships. Even though I'm no longer attending a religion, I feel like life is maybe even more sacred, and not necessarily in a spiritual, metaphysical sense, but just in the sense of I value every single moment, or I try to. And this song reflects that. So I'm just going to share this song with you as a parting sort of spiritual meditation or thought. I hope you enjoy it. And then I want to remind you that if any of you want to share your musical talents with us, Zach would love to hear from you and have you come up just like my kids did today and share your talents as well. So please do that, and we'll go ahead and listen to Holy Now by Peter Mayer. I hope you enjoy it.
was a boy each week, on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still. But now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. But now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Child's face, say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come and say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red wing.
Saw a little red-winged bird, smiling like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. Made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then, 'cause everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. That was really awkward. Thank you so much for coming. This means the world. Hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to visiting with you in the next room. Take care. Thank you.